FANSPLAINED, a media criticism podcast with Ryan and Em. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Em.
And in this episode, we're continuing our deep dive exploration series into the MCU with Captain America: The Winter Soldier, which is about a week behind. We're getting there.
We're getting there.
We're getting there. This is yet another entry into Phase 2 and follows Iron Man 3 and Thor: The Dark World in chronology. The Winter Soldier was released in April of 2014 as a follow-up to Captain America: The First Avenger, despite their roughly 70-year or so timeline gap. Unlike its predecessor, The Winter Soldier is also set in the year of its release, bringing Cap to modern day in his own films rather than just the Avengers.
Yes.
This is also the 9th entry into the MCU officially. Mm-hmm. Much later in our chronology, obviously, but it was the 9th release.
Yeah.
So, the concept for The Winter Soldier began as early as the first Avengers release in 2011, and the concept for the film's tone and vibe were solidified early on. Unlike the first film, however, this is yet another Marvel and Disney production independent of outside producers, so there's no having to fight with Paramount on distribution and release and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
This one really doesn't have a ton of production trivia because, as far as I can tell, it went fine.
Yeah. They
got to do what they wanted to do with it from the beginning.
And that is one of the things that makes it so good.
Yeah.
You would think Disney and Marvel would see that when you let these directors actually do what they want to do, that the results are actually really, usually, great.
Mm-hmm. It's when you let these films be their own little projects versus fitting into house style or even defining house style.
Mm-hmm.
Because for as much as Iron Man 3 and Thor kind of set the tone for a lot of house style going forward, mm-hmm. This film really deviates from it in a way where it's really hard to compare this film to those films on any kind of comparable level.
Yeah, like, we look at Iron Man, Thor, and Cap as being, like, the big three, especially when, you know, in that scene in Endgame where they confront Thanos.
Yeah.
So it's obvious, you know, that these are the big three in the MCU, at least in the Infinity Saga.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of amazing how in Phase 2... or Phase 1, Iron Man was the one everyone loved.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And in Phase 2, Cap's movie is the one that comes out swinging. And swinging hard.
And then in Phase 3, it's really Thor.
Yeah.
Ragnarok is really the one of the three that just... Well, I mean, Iron Man didn't really have a central film in Phase 3.
I would argue that Civil War is probably more Tony's movie.
Even though it's supposed to be... We'll get into that when we get into Civil War, but even though it's supposed to be Cap's movie, I'd argue that it's, at minimum, an Avengers movie and not a Captain America movie.
But Tony plays a way bigger role in that movie than you would think.
Well, and he does in Spider-Man as well, and we'll get into just why Tony didn't need a movie in Phase 3 to basically still be the star of Phase 3.
Yeah.
But that's for another day.
Yeah, you have Iron Man as the favorite in Phase 1. This one is the favorite in Phase 2. Mm-hmm. And then Thor Ragnarok in Phase 3.
Yeah, pretty much.
Nice.
Yes. So Captain America: The Winter Soldier was written by Marcus and McFeely, and we've covered them extensively, especially when it comes to Cap stuff, returning once again to the property that really made them. Mm-hmm. At least in terms of the MCU. Despite this following the troubled creative production of The Dark World, in which Marcus and McFeely were both attached as writers, The Winter Soldier benefits from a solidified early concept, genre determination, and a far more focused plot.
Yes.
The conspiracy genre was decided back in 2011 when writing for this movie really began, and cited inspirations include Three Days of the Condor, The Parallax View, Marathon Man, and All the President's Men, among a million other things. We will get to what I think you're going to say here in a minute.
Well, just Yeah, 2 of those movies include Robert Redford in the lead.
That was literally what I was going to get to
Okay.
when we get to Redford. But for this reason, the Russo brothers were hired as the film's directorial team, kind of like Johnston was hired for his ability to recreate like the nostalgic feel of the 1940s from The Rocketeer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still not entirely sure what the linchpin was with the Russos for them to be like, okay, yes, we want you to handle our 70s conspiracy flick.
Yeah, when they basically had just been directing like Community and Arrested Development.
Yeah, they've done a lot of like TV comedy stuff.
Yeah.
It's very odd, but that's why they handled it. They were hired to handle this political thriller, basically masquerading, quote unquote, as a superhero movie.
And it works great as that,
Yeah,
actually.
it absolutely does. Other work from the Russos, like we mentioned, includes Community, Arrested Development, a film called Welcome to Collinwood. They did You, Me, and Dupree. And yeah, and Joe Russo even directed the second episode of Agent Carter season 1. Not both of them, just Joe. Before they moved on to Civil War and the culmination of the Infinity Saga at the end of the MCU, or the Infinity Saga of the MCU.
Yeah.
And this ability to infuse dark humor shows in The Winter Soldier, as does this heavy involvement in Community, as much of the creative team shares credits here.
Yes.
We've kind of seen creative teams like this where a bunch of these people worked on stuff previously together.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed, the script also had insight from Chris McKenna, who also worked on Community, and this 6 Degrees doesn't even end there, but McKenna was brought in to help with some of the humor in the film, which actually really lands in this one.
Yeah, the
personally,
humor,
for me, it's actually pretty solid.
Yeah, the humor in this lands a lot better.
So, in terms of what The Winter Soldier is actually about, after saving New York from Loki's would-be invasion, Steve Rogers is left to contend with a modern world very different from the past he's quite literally left behind. This puts him in a tenuous place as part of S.H.I.E.L.D., comfortable with the process, yet deeply unnerved by the secrecy, the lack of morals or personal consideration, and the politics that feel entirely different from those he knows from, the 1940s.
And yet he's never come across, like, this straight-laced Republican Joss.
Right?
He does not come across like this at all. Like, you were saying when we were watching this that Steve's writing in this movie...
This is the strongest Steve's writing ever has been and ever will be.
Yeah.
Period. Full stop.
Mm-hmm.
Even with the Russos involved, this is the strongest that Steve ever is.
Yeah.
And we loved that first movie. But this one really lets Steve actually grow.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel like any of them ever go as hard into his personality like this did.
None of them ever really capture his personality in the way that this one does. Because Joss... Clearly, Joss just doesn't understand how to write Steve, and this movie in particular shows that.
Oh, thank God he wasn't actually involved with it, at least as far as we know.
Until, the end?
Yeah. I mean, the end credits thing is his, but that's the end credits thing. So, not really that attached.
Yeah.
So, after completing a mission with Romanoff to, supposedly, save a ship full of trapped S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, Rogers is skeptical of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s motivations, voicing this hesitation to Fury, who introduces him to Project Insight, a weaponized response to the Battle of New York, which analyzes people's behavior and observed activities to determine their potential threat to society and can basically take them out before anything ever happens.
It's Minority Report.
Steve hates this and is very outspoken in his disdain and disagreement with this project, moving to distance himself from S.H.I.E.L.D. However, when Fury is attacked by those who seem to have S.H.I.E.L.D. intel or even designations, Rogers is warned to trust no one while Fury delivers a flash drive with information on Project Insight to him before being attacked by an assassin known as the Winter Soldier, title drop, ending up in the hospital and quote-unquote dying not long after. This wariness has Steve pairing up and going on the run with Romanoff, and they're both tracking the origin of Fury's flash drive and what happens to be on it. It brings them to an old bunker in Steve's original training grounds for the Army, a building theoretically built by the original S.H.I.E.L.D., Howard Stark, Peggy Carter, and Colonel Phillips.
Chester
Phillips. Plugging in the drive brings Steve into contact with a digitized memory of an old acquaintance, Arnim Zola, I always say his name wrong, who informs Steve and Romanoff of the truth. Hydra's long invasion of S.H.I.E.L.D. from its near roots and the true motives of Project Insight. The elimination of threats to Hydra's reformation.
Dun,
Reformation?
dun.
Reformation.
Dun dun dun.
Dun dun dun. Now S.H.I.E.L.D. fugitives, Rogers and Romanoff go to the only place that seems safe. Steve's recent acquaintance Sam Wilson, an Air Force veteran running a local therapy group. So with few people left to trust, can they even trust Sam? And is there a way to hold Hydra back once more? I kind of got my words
Tongue
mixed
twister.
up there a little bit. Hold Hydra.
Hold Hydra.
Hold Hydra.
Hold Hydra.
Yeah, damn right. Get Hydra out of here. Fuck Hydra.
Hold it and yeet it.
This
into
bitch
the
empty.
ocean.
Yeet.
This bitch corrupt. Yeet.
Sorry, Peggy. Rest in peace.
I know, poor Peggy. God.
I'm so upset.
She worked so hard when we saw that, and this is what happened.
Right. Ugh.
I feel like she would kick everyone in the balls for letting this happen.
Right. So we've basically answered the question that we asked back with the first season of Agent Carter about how in the fuck S.H.I.E.L.D. even works. Spoilers, S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't work. It never worked. It never has worked. It just doesn't work.
It broken.
It broken. It was broken from the beginning. Yeet. So the Winter Soldier heralds the return of Chris Evans along with Joe Hansen, Seb Stan, Samuel L. Jackson, Kobe Smulders, and even Haley Atwell for a shorter appearance.
An amazing age-old makeup.
That apparently some of it was CGI because they weren't happy enough with the makeup.
Yeah, some of it was to blend it all together.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think they did a good job with it.
She did look very old.
It was her scene was incredibly heartbreaking.
I'm sure that hits different now for you.
Oh yeah, it does. It hits very different now, but also just going back and rewatching both seasons of Agent Carter, it hits on a whole new level with
Just
that
levels.
too.
It's an onion.
It's an onion of feelings, and I hate it.
We also even see short reappearances of Max Milano Hernandez and even Gary. We even can see Gary Shandling and Toby Jones.
Yes.
Gary Shandling coming back as the shitty senator from Iron Man 2.
Elijah.
God, he's the worst. I love
whisper.
him. Well, you expect him to be an absolute creep, and I love it though. Like he's the most convincing Hydra guy ever.
He is. He really is.
He's Ted Cruz.
The Zodiac Killer.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Hashtag allegedly.
Hashtag allegedly.
The film also introduces several new characters such as Anthony Mackie as Sam Wilson, Robert Redford as Alexander Pierce, Frank Grillo as Brock Rumlow, Emily Van Camp as Sharon Carter, and Georges St. Pierre as Georges Bartok.
Bartok.
Really, his name in the comics just is Bartok the Leaper. I don't know if they gave him the same first name just because.
Bon anniversaire.
We also have an extreme number of cameos in The Winter Soldier, and I'm not even going to mention all of them, but this includes Danny Pudi as a S.H.I.E.L.D. tech, DC Pearson as Aaron Wilson / the Apple Genius,
oh my god,
Gary Sinise as the Smithsonian narrator.
Really?
Yeah.
That's Lieutenant Dan?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Doing the narration for the exhibit in the Smithsonian.
Cool.
Stan Lee is a Smithsonian security guard.
Yes.
Ed Brubaker, who is the creator of the comics Winter Soldier, as one of the scientists with Bucky.
Oh my god, really?
Mm-hmm.
That's so cool.
And then Joe Russo is like a doctor in the hospital.
Nah.
And Marcus and McFeely are also like S.H.I.E.L.D. interrogators at some point. And then this also, at the end credit scene, introduces us to Elizabeth Olsen, Aaron Taylor Johnson, and Taylor Kretschmann leading up to their appearances in Age of Ultron.
Yep.
So, DC Pearson, who is the Apple guy, right, actually reprises this role for, like, this series of, like, Xbox Series X ads that were also meant to be ads for the Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Oh my god.
That revealed that he had a connection to Endgame, where, you know, like when they're playing like the multiplayer with Thor, and there's like the Noob Master 69 or whatever. That's the Apple guy.
Oh my god.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if he knows Fire Puma.
Fire Puma 412. You want a game? God, Timmy, please. Yes, I do. Please. Pearson and Pooty also connect back to Donald Glover. All three of them were in Community, even though Glover is more connected to Star Wars than the MCU. All this Community stuff just keeps going in circles.
Yeah, because Glover shows up in Homecoming.
Does he?
Yeah.
I don't remember this. Was he a cameo in Homecoming?
Yeah.
I don't remember it at all.
Yeah, he was talking
I
to
blanked
Peter.
out. I blanked out. Oh,
Yeah, he was like in this parking garage with Peter, or
Oh,
on the boat or something.
Bro, I blacked out so much of Homecoming because I was so mad about it. Not here or there, but yeah, so like it just has like this weird Community buddy group of like dudes who knew each other from Community, or like the comedy scene before they ended up on Community, and then they all end up in these like weird cameos in the MCU.
Good.
Also, apparently, originally this was not meant to be a Steve and Nat vehicle. This was meant to be a Steve and Hawkeye movie, because Hawkeye hadn't been in anything but the Avengers. So they wanted to give him
Thor.
They wanted to give him something that was akin to like Nat in Iron Man 2.
But he had been in Thor.
Sort of. It's not like Nat in Iron Man 2 where she was basically like a main character.
Yeah,
though.
but Clint and Steve makes no sense.
It doesn't, but that's apparently what the original concept was, but there were a bunch of like scheduling conflicts, so it obviously didn't work out, and we got Steve Nat anyway.
Look, I'm one of those people that actually do like Clint in the MCU, but I am not...
I don't hate Clint. I just don't like Jeremy Renner.
I mean, Jeremy Renner is a good actor. I'm just trying not to think about any of the other stuff.
He's just kind of a jerk.
Yeah. But I mean, I like Clint in the MCU. It legit makes... My brain cannot compute him and Steve having even remotely the same kind of chemistry.
It would be very odd.
It
would be
would.
very odd. I'd be interested to see how they could have done it, but at the same time, like, this would have been such an extremely bro movie.
Yeah.
And it works out so much better that you put Nat in it anyway.
Yeah,
it's a blessing in disguise that they ended up doing that anyway.
They have way more chemistry.
Yes.
Just off the charts chemistry.
Yeah.
And yes, I am a Steve Nat shipper.
I know you are.
Don't judge me. I love this movie for that. But also, maybe that explains why she has, like, that little arrow necklace.
Yes. Yes.
A lot of people thought that was, like, hinting at the Clintasha ship. But maybe instead that was a little thing to indicate that Clint was supposed to be in her place.
Well, I mean, I think that they wanted to do that because Clint was also heavily embroiled in S.H.I.E.L.D., and this was basically a very S.H.I.E.L.D. movie.
Well, so was Nat.
I know, but I think that was originally the idea, is to give him as much screen time as Nat had already gotten, because he really hadn't had much.
No, Natasha deserves more screen time.
I mean, I agree with you, and it worked out better.
I'm biased because she's one of my faves, so, you know.
It worked out better anyway.
It did.
So, Pierce was also written as an homage to Redford's work on 3 Days of the Condor, which was also a film inspo, and we talked about that. Also with All the President's Men, like, they used a lot of Robert Redford movies.
Yeah, basically, Pierce is like, not just like his character in 3 Days in the Condor, but is basically like a more devious version of him playing Bob Woodward in All the President's Men. That's why I was just like, oh?
Yeah, and Redford cited taking the role as, like, its difference to his usual work.
Yeah, because he normally doesn't play the villain.
But he plays probably... And this is one of those things, too, where, like, this is one of those standout movies because the villain really fucking works.
Yes.
You like the villain. He's creepy.
He's charismatic.
He's charismatic to the point where you kind of give a shit about him. Unlike, did we really care about the dude in Iron Man 3? I forgot his name, Killian. No, we didn't. Did we really care about Malekith? Not really at all.
I cared more about Guy Pearce's accent slipping in and out.
Oh my god.
Than I cared about him.
Will we really care that much about Ronan? No. Spoilers. Not really.
No.
You'll care more about the secondary villains in Guardians of the Galaxy than you will about Ronan. But, like, it's very rare for the villains to really, really stand out in a Marvel movie, unfortunately. And despite the fact that they have so many good villains, a lot of them just kind of fall flat.
The writing for them is not very strong at all, but the writing for Pierce was very solid. And Redford's acting, you know, no one really steals the scene from him.
No,
actually.
he was giving me, like, Obadiah Stane vibes, where, like, I liked to hate Obadiah a lot. Like, he wasn't a boring villain to me. He was there for a purpose, liked it, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, or, like, you know, the Red Skull kind of fell short for me a little bit, because there's just not a whole lot there all the time.
The most interesting thing about the Red Skull is literally when he rips his
face off. Yeah.
His face off. And it...
Face off!
Face off.
No, this is why Loki was, like, the main villain for, like, 3 films.
Yeah, because Tom Hiddleston...
Because he was actually a good villain.
And Tom Hiddleston was able to... You know, he can act his way out and through a paper bag. So it's like, even when the writing isn't very strong, you're still there for him.
Yeah, but... We'll find this problem even with some of the MCU movies from here on out that we actually do like. The villains still tend to fall... very flat.
Yeah.
Very flat. This is one of the few exceptions to the rule where they don't.
That's why I always love it when not only is the casting like chef's kiss, but the villain is just so good.
This is the... We'll get to the... I'm not even going to get into that right now because I'll be here for another half hour just complaining about that when I need to save it. So, not even going to mention that. Stan also trained with a plastic knife to do all of Bucky's, like, knife stunts so that they didn't have to rely on a stuntman to, like, splice scenes in there.
I also noticed him doing the knife drop. I see...
The Game of Thrones knife drop?
Yeah, Game of Thrones. I see where you took that from. You took that from Winter Soldier.
And then there were a bunch of other weird actresses that were actually considered for Sharon. Aside from Emily Van Camp, there was Anna Kendrick.
Oh my god.
Felicity Jones.
Well, she probably wouldn't have been bad, actually.
Imogen Poots.
No.
Amelia Clark.
Oh my god.
What a waste of Amelia Clark. Can you imagine? Fuck. Also, isn't she supposed to be in one upcoming or something?
Yeah, she's gonna be in the
Secret Invasion or something?
Yeah, Secret Invasion.
See, makes much more sense than casting her as Sharon. Or Teresa Palmer, who also would have been okay.
Isn't she in Discovery of Witches?
Yes, that is Teresa Palmer.
Okay.
Again, just like weird. Like it's not like they're all bad. They're just, huh?
Yeah, this role was not very big. Honestly, I'm just gonna say right now, I did not like Sharon at all until we got to the Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Yeah, but watching Falcon the Winter Soldier, and we'll get to this when we get to Falcon the Winter Soldier, but it really colored how I looked at Sharon in this movie.
Yeah.
And I have to really wonder where all of her Falcon and the Winter Soldier stuff actually started. Did it start here? Because there are things that Sharon does in this film that really make me actually doubt her motivations even this early, versus it being so blindsiding when we get to Falcon and the Winter Soldier, what she does.
And I mean, in the comics, isn't, like, Agent 13, like, who she is? Isn't that, like, a double
Hydra thing? Yeah.
Or isn't she, like, a double agent from the get-go?
Yes. Which is why I'm just like, y'all...
Maybe her being the villain, air quotes, isn't really all that surprising. But again, you gave her better motivations, you gave her better character growth and development, you gave her a personality I could actually see.
My thing with this is, and again, we'll get into this when we get into other films, because the other films later will absolutely break reason when it comes to Cap lore in specific.
Yes.
But if I understand Sharon's motivations from the lens of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier applied to this film, I can at least understand her targeting Steve in a, quote, romantic capacity in a more manipulative light that makes me swallow it a lot easier than the movie's just trying to force this ship on me of, I'm gonna get into spoilers because everyone's fucking seen Endgame by this point. Who's gonna see it? It's been out forever. But, like, if I'm to understand that you were building up to Steve going back into the past since the beginning, which is garbage because both the first Cap, this Cap, and Agent Carter all have both him and Peggy moving on, and that is the point of both of them, and they work that way. But okay, fine. If you're really building up to Steve going back into the past and having his happy ending from the get-go, I'm supposed to swallow that his niece does not know that she's trying to make out with her uncle.
Yeah.
That he is fine making out with his niece. Like, there's literally nothing about this that makes sense.
Also, I pointed it out when we were watching it, that it's incredibly depressing that Peggy goes through everything she does and ends up with freaking
Alzheimer's.
Or dementia.
Whatever it is, yeah.
I don't think they're ever really clear about it, but she ends up with that. And I was like, what if she does remember Steve coming back, or has already experienced that, but she can't remember it in this movie because of her illness,
which is just so triply fucked up. Like, but the thing is that this movie completely josses that, or they're jossing this movie, because Peggy's interview in the 50s as part of the Smithsonian thing actually cites that she is married to someone else that was introduced to her tangentially by Steve.
Or like Steve saved his
Steve saved his life, and that is the reason she ended up being able to marry this guy down the line, is because Steve saved his life. And so Steve's been affecting her life even after he's missing or gone or whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, they made Sosa a soldier who fought in World War II.
Yeah, I really think that was more intended to be what was happening there, but it went off the rails somewhere.
It absolutely went off the rails. But this is why I don't...
Again, we'll get to this when we get to Endgame, because that was also written by the people in question here, which is why I don't understand how we suddenly just break canon. You can't have been planning this from the beginning, because the things you're setting up here don't make sense.
They literally go against what you've set up, and they completely...
And I just don't want to think about how weird and creepy it is for Sharon to be hitting on her uncle when, even if you take away Steve not really knowing better because he's still young Steve, not old Steve or whatever, she should know.
She should know, but even if you take out all of the time travel stuff, you still have a man who can't be with the woman he loved, so he's making out with her niece instead. It's like, because you can't be with the mother, you're being with the daughter.
Yeah, it's gross. I mean, at first, he doesn't know that either, because they're lying to him about who Sharon even is.
Yeah.
He just thinks she's some chick down the hall.
And I'm sorry, but I know people... I remember people fighting with me over this crap when this first started in the fandom, and I'm sorry, but I have seen every season of Game of Thrones, and I can tell you right now that this still skeeves me out, just like John and Danny skeeved me out, and I have a problem with it. And if you don't like it, you can fight me about it again. Seriously, give us the engagement in the comments. I will.
You will not. You will not fight with people in the comments.
And it's just... It feels icky. It's really gross because you can't be with her, so you're just gonna be with a family member. I don't understand how people are cool with that.
Well, and this is why I have to question Sharon's motivations, especially when you're given the lens of what happens in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and then you reapply it back here, right?
Yeah.
There's this part where Fury ends up in Steve's apartment warning him off that S.H.I.E.L.D's been, compromised, not to trust anybody. because Fury's been hurt, and then he's going to end up quote-unquote dead.
Yeah.
He's not dead. He's not Uncle Ben. He's
Surprise!
Not dead.
He Romeo and Juliet it.
Yeah, he's not Uncle Ben. He's not dead. But, like, there's this part where, like, he literally says, don't trust anybody.
Anyone.
And immediately, the first person to walk right in the fuck to Steve's apartment in the middle of that is Sharon. And she's suddenly giving him this line about, this is who I actually am. I was sent by S.H.I.E.L.D. We have to do this and this and this and this. And it's like, how the fuck did you know this? How do we know that Fury trusted you enough to do this? We don't. Other than the fact that she was placed near Steve. It makes me suddenly question who Sharon is actually working for. And then there's that shot where she's talking to Robert Redford's character. She's talking to Pierce. We don't hear anything they say. She just turns around
and walks by Steve.
And says something to him. And, like, it's this weird, shady look. Like, yeah, she kind of stands up for Steve at the end. But how do we know that that isn't, like, a fucking front?
Yeah,
we
how
don't.
do we know that's just her playing her part? See,
we don't, because that's literally what she's doing from the beginning. I have to really wonder if Sharon is not double agenting it from here, from the beginning.
I am more willing to believe that Sharon's heel turn and double agenting has been from the beginning. I'm more willing to believe that has been from the beginning than I am that you were, working on Steve going back in the past.
And getting his dance with Peggy to appease the fandom.
I think that's a load of malarkey.
I do too.
And I think
as much as I do agree that Steve looks like Joe Biden.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, I agree.
He looks, Chris Evans looks like young Joe Biden. Old Steve looks like Joe Biden today.
Yes, it's true.
And as much as, you guys were honing, you were gunning for that ship, a lot of Endgame genuinely, especially the ending with Steve, feels like it's straight out of a fanfic.
Because it probably is.
Okay, it feels like it's straight out of a fanfic. It breaks
so much canon, even established by the writers in question.
That's why I am calling malarkey, and I don't think you guys were planning that from the beginning at all.
No, absolutely not. That's my only beef with this movie, because this movie, in and of itself, is great. When you're trying to, do other stuff to joss the stuff set up in this movie, fuck you, no, this movie was perfect, leave it alone.
Yeah, this movie was great. That's the thing. Like, those are really the only gripes that I have with it, and those are things that happen later down the line.
Yeah, it's the things that happen in other films.
Yeah, it's the things that happen in the other films that fuck with this one, when this one is so solid, it's so good. Why would you do that?
I don't know. So, speaking of, the cinematographer for Falcon the Winter Soldier, just Captain America the Winter Soldier, is Trent Opalock, whose other work included District 9, for which he got a BAFTA nomination, Elysium, Chappie, and then he also went to work with the Russos on Civil War and Infinity War / Endgame.
Now see, District 9 Elysium, not bad. District 9's the stronger movie. Haven't seen Chappie. A lot of people tell me not to see Chappie.
But the visuals of Chappie look fine.
But the visuals of Elysium are really strong, so I can definitely see that.
And I like the visuals of Civil War, which we'll get it to.
Yeah.
And I like some of the visuals of Infinity War Endgame, but we'll get to those, because that's also another can of worms.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also see, with this film, you can see the marked difference between Marvel's extreme use of green screening for everything, and this film's trying to do more practical effects. Yes, this film does have some weird points where you can definitely tell the difference between the practical effects and them using a backdrop, and it's almost more obvious because so much of this had been practical, so when it's not, you can really tell it's not.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that it was so much more practical, because it's not really a look that we'd gotten in a whole lot of other stuff to now.
No. And even though it's not as colorful as the first Avenger was, it still looks very good.
So good.
They know how to make...
It doesn't look muted like Thor did.
No.
Oh.
It still looks very good.
Thor is a sin in the way that it looks. It looks like Man of Steel, and I'm still mad about it.
Yeah, it was you said it was Marvel's Man of Steel.
It is. It is. I'm convinced it is. But yeah, you can see the marked difference in quality, the practical effects used here, And that's really what makes it work as such a solid, like, 70s-esque action spy movie, is because it feels so much more realistic. Shane Black, dear Shane Black, this is how you make the Tom Clancy Marvel movie. It's this. It was not Iron Man 3. It was this.
Yes, it was
this. This is how you make the spy movie.
This was the spy
This was
movie.
it. It was not Iron Man 3, but...
No, it was this movie.
No, it was this movie.
The Russos did it.
The Russos did it. Sorry. The Russos did it. Simpsons did it. Simpsons did it.
The Russos did it.
So the special effects for this movie, despite there being slightly fewer of them, also had like an Academy nomination for this movie.
Nice.
Fair, because the stuff that really works in this movie,
it works really well.
Beautiful. And you had Lola VFX, the same company that handled like Baby Steve in the first movie, the same people who handle like a lot of like the de-aging stuff. They're the ones that obviously handled the flashback with Small Steve.
Yes.
They're also the ones who did Peggy's aging effects because she's 96 in this movie.
Damn, Peggy.
And they tried practical for the latter, but they weren't really happy with how it looked, so they had to CGI over the top of it because they weren't fully satisfying, so you kind of get this like mix of effects there.
I mean, I think like I said, I think it came out really well.
It actually turned out really nice. So the music, and this is the first time we've wanted to talk about music, and I don't know how many fucking movies. Several. The music is composed by Henry Jackman, and we're super jazzed about this. The soundtrack is phenomenal.
It's so good.
You have all these Wilhelm screams behind Bucky every time he shows up, and it's like...
No, they're not
literal perfection.
No, they're not Wilhelm screams. They're like Nazgul screams.
I don't care what they are. They're beautiful.
They're high-pitched, they're creepy, they're scary.
Oh, yeah, just like...
They're perfect for him because it's so menacing.
Yeah, and it's like timed perfectly.
It's like
the
a
music really works. I notice it.
Yeah, it's like a musical jump scare for Bucky.
Oh my god, it's so good.
Yeah, all of the themed work. It had this like futuristic modern bent on like your typical spy thriller music.
Yes.
And it works so good.
Yeah, and then you get like these weird horror elements when you get to Bucky that make it feel... It really reminds me a lot of how you had those like perfectly timed moments in the Batman.
Yes.
When you'd have like Bruce walking, especially that scene with like the penguin and the overturned car, and you had like the perfect music to that, where it felt like a Western as he was walking up to the car. Perfection. This is what I want in a movie soundtrack.
This is what
I don't even have to notice like
Yeah.
every single beat of the music. I don't care about that. But when it is perfectly done and it is synced to the character and the moment, that is the shit you actually remember.
And it's basically what makes your soundtrack so strong, is that if you can get people to remember those things, then your soundtrack is a success.
Whereas 90% of the time when we're talking about these movies, we're like, I don't really remember the music. It was there. It was fine, I guess.
Yeah,
whatever.
It was basically background noise.
It didn't throw me off, so I guess it was okay. No, that is not what this movie is. This movie is perfect when it comes to music.
I don't think we've talked about a score this much since...
Doyle, maybe?
Yeah, Patrick Doyle with Thor. Mm-hmm. Because he did a lot of the same thing. Like, the music there...
Yeah, was perfectly fit for the tone, for the character,
it was strong.
for the moments. And I'd argue that this one even actually does a little bit better because it's, like, extremely situational.
Yeah.
It's so good because you have to key in, like, the sound effects on top of it. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of the sound design on top of the soundtrack that really, really makes this one work. Whereas, like, Doyle's is still fantastic, don't get me wrong. But you don't really quite have the same level of, like, sound design on top of it that this one does.
This one is a bit more modernized in that regard, where Doyle's is your more traditional soundtrack.
Yeah, which, I mean, it really worked for Thor.
Yeah, they're both...
It would not work for this movie. Like, if you tried to take Cap 1's soundtrack and use it for this film, kind of like they tried to take parts of Doyle's soundtrack and use it for Thor 2.
It's not the same.
And it just didn't work because your tone for Asgard was completely different. It would not work if you were using 40s Captain America music and just throwing it in here like it's still going to work because he's not the same character anymore.
No, you have the traditional with Doyle, modernized with Jackman, and they're both very good, strong examples of that. And meanwhile, what I want to say what this one does nicely is that it has more jazzy music, more R&B, which fits with the 70s thriller.
Absolutely. Like, they have this, like, Steve's, like, list of pop culture stuff.
And excuse you, sir, Star Wars and Star Trek are two very different things.
I love the little slash. I love
Don't
the little
you do
slash,
that
between them, Steve. God bless you. But he's watched one of them and not the other. He's watched Star Wars but not Star Trek.
Of course he is.
It's like, Steve, I think you'd be more behind Star Trek, honestly.
Right?
But, you know, fine, I guess you went for the Nazi-oriented one first, and I can't really blame you there.
Yep.
Whatever.
And those stormtroopers look very familiar to me.
Right. So, Jackman's other work actually includes a lot of work on Matthew Vaughn flicks, which are also very period, very specific. You can actually see this very continued trend of, like, music that really just fits the tone.
Yes.
Because he's done the music for Kick-Ass, X-Men First Class, which is perfection, and we'll get to that when we do X-Men First Class, because
we
League
will
of
be
its
doing
own in X-Men movies.
We will be doing that.
He also did The Kingsman and Kingsman the Golden Circle, which I did not enjoy, but the music was very Kingsman. It's fine, and I liked Elton John in that movie. I mean,
that's
much.
Probably the saving grace of that soundtrack is Elton John.
Yes. He's also done a bunch of, like, weird Disney stuff, so he did the music for Wreck-It Ralph, Big Hero 6. He also did Shane Black's Predator.
Yeah, the one he did later down the line.
It's so funny that we mentioned Shane Black when this dude did the soundtrack for Shane Black's Predator. He also did the music for Detective Pikachu.
Aww.
And then he's done, like, additional synth music for Hans Zimmer stuff. So he did, like, the synth on The Dark Knight. And he did the synth on the Da Vinci Code.
I can tell that because I listen to those soundtracks, like, a lot. And I can definitely tell the... I could hear that.
That's why this sounds very Zimmer-esque, is because he's the guy that contributed some of that to some of those Zimmer
So it's not really him sounding like Zimmer, it's just him being himself.
It's just him being himself. But yeah, that's why you get a lot of those comparisons.
Yeah.
And then obviously we'll address him again because he also did the music for Civil War and The Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
Which is the first time we actually felt like it was like another Cap vehicle that really worked as a Cap vehicle.
Yeah, Cap.
Like, really solidly.
Falcon and the Winter Soldier was a very solid. I know I keep saying that, but it's true. When it's solid, it's solid.
When it's good, it's good.
Yes.
When it's not good, it's mediocre to bad.
It's mediocre at best.
Yeah.
And we don't like that here because, again...
No, mediocre is, in fact, not hitting the mark. Mediocre is bad, especially when it comes to music, because you're not really making anything memorable. It's just
like I've said this on here, and I've said this in other reviews that I've written for certain shows, especially Disney shows, where people want to argue with me online about that. When you give me a good example, a shining example of how good something can be, then yeah, I'm gonna expect that from you. And if you don't even try to deliver that, and I can tell when some of these people don't even try, or there are too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yes!
When you do that, then yeah, I'm gonna bitch about it because I know and have seen you can do better.
Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of demand better of my time, of my money, and I'm sure there are a lot of other people out there who love Marvel, who love this movie and movies like it, that expect the same thing.
Which is precisely why we are about a week behind.
Yeah.
We're still in the first third of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah.
We're gonna get through it. But there's a reason for that, and it brings, like, we'll probably get to this more when we cover that, and we will be covering it, we will be catching up, we're just kind of behind. But this is kind of, the reason for that is you have this perfect example next to something that really whiffs it. And there are parts of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that are okay.
Yeah.
But damn, like, it does not meet the same level.
No, it is not even...
remotely.
Like, my God, it doesn't even meet the same level as Agent Carter Season 1.
Not even.
And that had a TV budget.
Yeah.
And they still managed to do more with that
It had
than
a similar
Agents of
ABC
S.H.I.E.L.D.
budget because they were both on the same network.
Yeah, than Agents of fucking S.H.I.E.L.D. over here.
Yeah. But we'll get to that when we actually cover that. We are, yes, we do recognize we're a little bit behind here.
I mean, there's a reason why, you know, we don't do this full-time yet, sadly. So we have all this other stuff that we need to do.
This stuff just piles up IRL, you know, so work on top of everything else. Yeah.
We're working on it.
It piles up. We're getting there, though. We will catch up.
We will.
Because we have way too much to get through to let it keep lagging.
Yeah.
Way too much.
Plus Daredevil, which comes after Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah, and you like that.
A
So...
lot. It's the better show, and yeah, it's a lot shorter. You will appreciate it, ma'am. I'm pretty sure you will. Don't give me that look.
Anyway, so getting back on track... What would I know what your final rating for this is going to be, but what's your final rating for this?
5 out of 5.
It's absolutely a 5.
It's
a
absolutely 5.
How could this be anything else? It's perfect.
I love everything about this movie.
SpongeBob Rainbow, perfect.
Yes, that's this movie.
Yes.
This is one of my favorite Marvel movies, and honestly, I still believe it's one of the few Marvel movies that you can easily watch by itself. You don't even need to watch the others. You can watch this one standalone, and you can it has great rewatch value, too.
Yeah.
Because
it does actually contextualize S.H.I.E.L.D. in a way where you don't have to know what's going on previously.
Yeah,
really.
it has the throwbacks without feeling like it's being repetitive, and we've started at the beginning and gone through it now all the way to here, and it doesn't ever feel repetitive.
No.
It feels like it's touching on stuff in a new way, even stuff that we already know. And it has Steve, the Kool-Aid Man Rogers, busting through doors and walls, and I loved every minute of it.
Dorito Man, Steve Rogers.
Boom, boom, boom. Fuck your property damage, Rogers. Boom, boom. Just the amount of just destruction.
They did the Wolverine Origins helicopter scene, and it was still better.
Yes.
Basically.
They did... Oh, my God. That scene that starts on the freeway and ends up off the bridge and into a bus.
Oh my God.
There's just so much destruction in this one scene, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? There's so much property damage here, and the Hulk isn't even involved.
Those scenes with Bucky out on the street, absolutely, actually, I even said this when we were watching this, I'm like, this looks like the Batman.
This looks like a horror movie is what it looks like,
Well,
too.
it looks like the Batman was taking notes from those scenes in particular, because, I mean, Bucky's makeup even looks a lot like Bruce's non-mask off makeup. They're very similar.
They're also wearing similar boots.
Yes, they are.
They are.
Yeah.
So what's your...
I mean, obviously it's a 5.
Okay.
It's obviously a 5.
So we just agree that this is a great movie.
Yeah, like, this phase also introduces me to one of my other favorite MCU movies, which we haven't gotten to, but we will. It does actually give me one of my other favorites, but at the same time, like, this is really the best the MCU has ever been, and really ever gets. Like, there are other great movies in the MCU, do not get me wrong, I've enjoyed many, many, many of them. But I think this is honestly a peak that they have not really quite hit since.
I'd argue No Way Home. I'd argue No Way Home reaches that peak. I think so. I'm gonna argue that.
We'll see how I feel about that when we rewatch it. In context,
You literally cried.
I know. I sobbed. I did. But... like, in terms of filmmaking, that one also relies a hell of a lot on nostalgia that this one does not have to. This one doesn't have to rely on other canon stuff that the Spider-Man does. To be fair, and I loved No Way Home. I agree with you. It's the most Spider-Man, Marvel, or MCU Spider-Man's ever been. But honestly, this is a peak for me that is very, very difficult for Marvel to really reach.
So even Guardians doesn't reach this for you?
No, not really.
Thor Ragnarok.
Ragnarok, maybe. Again, I'll see how I feel about it in context. But again, it's like exceptions to the rule might hit this, but it's really difficult to hit this level again. A lot of things, even though they're good, don't, because they will whiff it on other things that just don't make it quite as good. And that's how I'd argue about Guardians, is there are some flaws about that movie.
I measure them
that just
basically
don't quite work as well as this film does as a film for me.
Basically, the films that end up being my favorites are the ones that I can easily say that I can watch these again by themselves, and I can rewatch them multiple times and never get tired of them. This is one of those movies.
I'd argue this is better than Iron Man 1.
Well, Iron Man 1's on the same level, that it's one of those movies.
And I love Iron Man 1, but I'd argue that this is better than Iron Man 1.
I do think it's a stronger film than Iron Man 1, yes.
Yeah. This is what I mean.
In terms of, like,
filmmaking, I'm not saying that we can't love them both. I'm just saying in terms of filmmaking, this is, like, echelon top tier. This would actually be, like, if there was a Best Picture award for just MCU crap, right? This would be it. This would win it.
This would be in your top tier.
Yes.
Your S tier.
This is my S tier of MCU movies, which we'll get to when we actually tier these when we're all done, but...
See, it's one of my S tier. I have multiple ones.
I mean, I have a few, but this one really is just top level for me. So.
Also great Steve and Nat representation.
I mean, they're both, like, honestly, this is the best Natasha's character ever really gets written until her solo film.
Yeah. I think she gets really great writing here. Like I said, I love their chemistry. Mm-hmm. It's, like, off the charts.
She gets beautiful development here that she really doesn't get in anything else until she gets a solo. Yes. That she should have had 10 years prior, but, you know, whatever.
And not only that, but it's this movie that... It's one of the reasons I get so pissed off at their relationship in Age of Ultron, because it's like this movie never happened.
I mean, Age of Ultron does that too. Most of the stuff that happens before it,
like,
sadly.
their whole relationship is fleshed out and developed in such a believable way. It turns into something that both of them clearly take comfort in. Mm-hmm. And I just...
Yeah, most of our gripes are really things that happen as a result of this movie or after this movie.
We also watched War Games for this movie. Also another solid movie that I would recommend people see.
Yeah, the reference that this movie makes, I can see it. Mm-hmm. It really works tonally.
And it actually hits a lot of the same story beats as that one.
It absolutely did. And I was really into it. Mm-hmm. Like, no, I would not like to play a game, actually, Natasha.
The smartest move is not to play at all. I'm like, yes!
Yes, exactly. This is futile. It sucks.
But yeah, that's
where we are with that. So thank you for listening to this episode of FANSPLAINED. If you enjoy what we do, consider donating on Ko-fi. Everything we make goes right back into the production quality of the show. We appreciate all of our subscribers and everything you do, and we're thankful for anything from Hulk smashing that like button to your questions and comments on each episode, and especially sharing the show with your friends. FANSPLAINED is usually a weekly media criticism and deep dive podcast, and though we're behind, we are still currently working our way through the chronological order of the MCU. We'll also be handling our catch-up reactions to Moon Knight. We're going to combine a couple episodes because we're a couple behind right now.
Yeah, 2 behind.
And we'll handle that in the same condensed way that we handled the first one. Mm-hmm. At least until we cover it in the chronology, and then we'll dive into it when we get there.
Yeah.
And next week / later this week, we'll be catching up with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and hopefully Daredevil Season 1.
Yes.
So that's what's on the docket. Whether or not those come out at a specific time,
that's when
can't really say yet.
That's when shit gets real good.
Yes. So you can find our updates here on YouTube as well as on Twitter and Ko-fi at FANSPLAINED. If you want more of our conversations on the MCU and other fandoms, subscribe to our channel and hit the bell for new episode notifications. So until next time, Salt Shakers, this has been Ryan.
And M.
With the FANSPLAINED podcast, and we'll see you next week.